Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am in a very frozen Richmond Park this morning, as you can see. Just after sunrise, it's about -4, and I got some very cold toes. I'm here today to talk to you about this camera, the Leica Q2. I've had this camera for just over a month now, borrowing it from a good friend of mine, Connor, and I wanted to chat here about my thoughts and opinions on the camera. There's plenty of videos about this camera out, so this won't be a fully spec'd video, just my impressions from someone who's really only ever shot Fujifilm cameras, never shot a full frame camera, and is brand new to the Leica system. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful day. I didn't know a huge amount about this camera when I first got my hands on it, but it is a full frame camera with a 47 megapixel sensor. It has a 28mm fixed focal length that goes down to about f1.7 on there, and it was brought out in 2019. It also has the customary red Leica badge to boot, which adds about £4 of value. What a beautiful day. Funny enough, there are a lot of really good things to say about the Leica Q2, and its main selling point, I think, and everyone can agree, is this lovely 28mm lens. It's a very common thing to say with the Leica Q series, that you kind of get a body for free and you buy a great lens. If you're not aware, Leica cameras and their lenses can go for 3, 4, 5, 6, multiples of thousands, and to get a lens such as this and a body as well, it's kind of the common saying that it comes for free. And the reason is because this lens on this Leica is special. It's the same lens that's on the Q and the Q3, and it's just, in fairness to it, it is a phenomenal lens. It's 28mm, so it's very wide, down to 1.7, it's tack sharp all the way through. It's quite an inspiring lens, I find. It's made me take a lot more portraits of family and friends when I've had it, and it does have quite a, I suppose, unique look. Coming from the APS-C world, I've never had something with such shallow depth of field and so wide, and it's a very lovely combination together. And when you pair it with the 47 megapixel sensor that you get on this body, it makes an incredibly versatile lens. Yeah, it's definitely the unique selling point of this camera, is that lens paired with that sensor. I was about to say a few more nice things, but I think, as you may have seen in the background, the deer are starting to creep up beside me, so I'm going to have to move in a sec. I love Richmond Park for this sort of thing, but I'm going to move out of the way now, just so you can see this. It's lovely out, shall we? As you can see, I've ended up in the thick of it unintentionally. I didn't mean to get in their way. Oh, stunning. I suppose I should get back to the video. Right, well, now I feel slightly less at risk of getting run over by a herd of deer. I can continue to talk about the pros of the Leica Q2. One exceptional one is the build quality on this camera. Compared to, for example, the Fuji stuff, it's night and day. It's built like a tank. It's weatherproof to within an inch of its life. It hurts to talk about, but the first evening I borrowed this camera off my mate. We had finished up our shooting in London. We went to a pub, had a few beers, and coming back from the bar with this around myself, someone knocked into me holding 2 pints and spilled them all over this camera. And yeah, full of Guinness, which wasn't the plan, and it was fine. So I've got lots of faith in the weather sealing of this camera, and the build quality in general is fantastic. Some other things I love I really enjoy about this camera. One is the battery compartment. Do that, it doesn't fall out. Do that and it comes out. I love that. Pop it out like that. Great. Fantastic. Also, something else that I really enjoy is the menu system. But the menu system itself is super easy to use. Coming from Fujifilm again as my reference, the menus are not great. The menu system on this is very easy to use, very simple. And as well, compared to Fujifilm, for example, again as my reference, but the Photos app, the Leica Photos app is a dream to use. It's just fantastic. It's so easy. It works, it connects to your phone, the images send across, whether it's a RAW or a JPEG. It's just so much better than the Fujifilm X app or the older one. It's just much better. Sorry, one thing I didn't mention earlier before I get into negatives was the macro mode. It's quite fun to use. And you go from, that's normal, and you go to macro. It's not the easiest thing to turn one-handed, but it drops the aperture down from 1.7 to 2.8, but you do get really up close, and because it's so sharp, it's very versatile. It just does capture an insane amount of detail up close, so that's a plus. Well, I suppose we better chat about the negatives of the Q2 at some point. It's not a perfect camera, and in my eyes, in a lot of ways, it should be better than it is. Firstly, it's a well-known thing, but the autofocus on the Q2 is terrible. It's just not that great. If you're planning on shooting anything moving, you're going to be left wanting. It's very slow, it misses often, it'll tell you it's autofocus, but it's really, like, it has focus on something, it's not what you want. For the amount of money you are paying for this camera, I don't think it's up to standard, and I'm fairly sure that has been fixed with the Q3 and it's a bit better, but this was made in 2019, and autofocus wasn't a new thing back then, and for what you're paying for, the autofocus isn't up to scratch. The camera itself is quite slow, both to turn on and turn off. It just takes time. So it's not something that you're going to be able to turn on immediately and capture the image, and if you want to turn it off, it takes a while. And it is just a bit slow, like the autofocusing being slow, it is just a bit of a slow camera. And again, some people like that. It's not an action camera, but it does take its time, and it's not one for the fast pace, sort of turn on, capture an image quickly. You do have to just be a bit more patient with the camera. Something I don't like about the Q2, which again is a personal preference thing, but the ergonomics of this camera are bad. Oh. Someone's let their dog off the leash, and they don't have recall, and there's loads of deer around. If you're gonna have a dog, lads, don't let off the leash in a park full of deer when you have no recall. Oh, the deer are on the move, and I am afraid again. Oh, they're really on the move. Wow. Don't be that dog owner. Those poor deer. You're ruining my video as well, lads. All the wildlife photographers just kind of like, what are you doing? Sorry, what was I saying? The ergonomics on the Leica Q2 are not for me. It's, as you can see, it's nice and sleek and hard to hold. Bar the fact that Connor has gone ahead and got the optional thumb grip, it's really hard to hold. This recess here, it's not enough. And even with the thumb grip, it's still, you're kind of pinching the camera, and I've got gloves on, so it almost makes it a bit easier, but with your hand, it hurts after a while. And I just don't think it's ergonomically that great to hold. It's not a very one-handed camera, which is fair enough. It may not be designed to be, and that might be the point, but I find I like to be able to take a photo one-handed and change settings one-handed to an extent. And this, compared to the Fujifilms, this is much more of a two-handed experience, which is fair enough. But I don't think the ergonomics are that great, and I think the ergonomics are sacrificed for how good the looks are. Or they're sacrificed for the looks, I should say, objectively. And the thumb grip itself I have an issue with. I looked on the Leica website, it's like 200 quid for this thumb grip, and granted you can get them maybe 50, 60 quid second hand, or some other knockoff ones, but for the Leica thumb grip, it's 200 quid. For a camera that probably costs in the region of 4 or 5 grand brand new. That's mental. Another bit of the hardware I think is lacking is the screen and the lack of tilt. It doesn't tilt. Tilt screens are not a new thing again, and back in 2019 they weren't. And that's been fixed with the Q3, so it kind of makes us null and void. But chatting about this particular camera, the fact there's no tilt screen is mental. I just think it is. If you're gonna have one, have it tilt at least up. Doesn't have to do the whole thing, doesn't have to be a selfie one, just at least up. Because yeah, I think like, if you're gonna give me the option of the screen, it should tilt. Otherwise, I may as well not have an EVF. I mean, sorry, that's a bit reductive, they do different things, but if you're gonna have a screen, it may as well tilt, because an EVF clearly doesn't. The lack of a USB-C charging is mental. I don't understand it. You just have the biggest and blockiest kettle lead attached to a giant battery charging block, where a single, oh, more deer. Where are you coming from? Wanna find your friends? Yeah, the fact that there is just no form of USB-C charging or USB-A or even micro USB charging on this camera is nuts. There is no kind of travel option for charging with a battery pack is mental to me, and the battery charger itself is massive. I don't understand it. Why is it so big? And to accompany that, for the battery you're charging, the battery life on the Leica is bad. Compared to every other camera I've used, it dies quicker. The battery's not small on it either. Like, that's a big battery, and the camera does not last very long. I don't know if that's gotten better on newer cameras. Yeah, these are kind of things that if you think if you've used, for example, the Q or the Q3, if they're better or worse, let me know. Because I'd love to know if they've gotten better. I'm probably not going to try a Q3 or a Q3 43 for a long time. I'm kind of interested to see if some of these things have gotten better, like the autofocus and the battery life. Because yeah, these are things which are very first world problems, really. Maybe some people will forgive it because it is Leica, but I don't think that gives it a pass on really basic stuff this camera should have. Having to edit the Leica files has been both good and bad. And I'm going to focus on the bad now, and I can chat about the good later. They're kind of subjective, these ones, I think, more so than objective, but I'm having to shoot this camera and the raw files differently and protect the highlights way more than on Fujifilm files. In my photography, I do like to blur out the highlights a lot if I don't think there's much sky information, for example. I don't like everything to look like a HDR image. That's a personal editing preference, but these don't blow out as nicely in post, and they don't capture as nicely in the moment. So I'm having to be very careful with how I shoot highlights and really underexpose my images. And it's a different shooting style, but I found that there's a lot less recoverability in the highlights with these raw images than maybe there are in the Fuji ones, which I thought was interesting because I would have assumed a higher dynamic range in both the highlights and the shadows, whereas I find the Fuji files handle highlights much more better or naturally. And for me, I don't really try to recover a lot of shadow detail from the Fujis because I've exposed for it properly, whereas in this you can recover a lot. So that's the pros and the cons. I'm waffling a bit, but you understand what I'm getting at. I don't really enjoy the highlight side of the files from the Leica Q2. My toes are ice blocks. I need to move and warm up my feet and warm up my socks. It is freezing. Just last thing, don't be that dog owner if you're in a park with deer or off lead in general. Just don't do it. Be responsible. I really hope I've captured some of how beautiful it is today, because as much as I did not want to get out of a warm, cozy bed this morning, oh, this is beautiful. Before I give my conclusion, I do want to talk about some of the things which are, I guess, a bit more subjective. They're a bit mixed. But the first one is the EVF and the quality of the screen. I personally have seen some bad things about the Q's screen recently in comparison to the likes of Sony and Canon, which I've never used before, so I can't comment on that. But compared to the Fujifilm, the EVF is great. It's nice and big. I mean, it's a bit dark, I find at times, but otherwise it's great. And the screen itself at the back is not too bad either. Aside from the non-tiltiness of the back screen LCD, touchscreen works nicely. So kind of, I guess it's a bit of a mix. I've enjoyed it, but it's interesting to hear other opinions on the internet of people who don't. The contrasty files is one. Well, the Leica files, they kind of have a baked-in contrastiness and saturation to them. These are very punchy and very cold, I find. I would rather they were maybe a bit flatter, personally, but it's better to have it, I suppose, and remove it than have to add it in, is one way of looking at it. Yeah, it's just kind of personal preference. Fuji files are a lot different, so it's been a bit of a learning curve having to get used to that. But that being said, I love the black and white files that come out of it, or how easy it is to make the black and whites look beautiful. That's something I do love about this camera, and it's always a good fallback if you can't get the colors right. Black and white's a shout. I spoke about the ergonomics earlier, and one of the things about the ergonomics I don't hate, but it could be better in particular, I'm going to say, is this exposure compensation dial. Just this one here. Yeah, it's quite hard to use. It's just really inset compared to some of the other, well, compared to like the Fuji, for example, it's just raised a bit more, and it's just, I find it hard to use. With the thumb grip there, like I said, it's a very two-handed camera. So yeah, that's a bit of a mixed bag. Oh, it's just such a lovely day. This is a very pretty scene. This is very pretty. Yeah, this is nice. This is nice. My final thoughts really are on the Leica Q2. Are fairly straightforward, really. It's a beautiful camera that costs too much money and should be better. And that might sound harsh to a lot of people, and objectively, I don't think this camera is as good or is good enough for the price you pay. I think the one thing that is good enough is the lens. That would be fine if the camera body was better. I don't think the Leica branding should let you get away with the fact that the rest of this camera should have been better upon release, and still isn't worth it to me. Now, it's a beautiful camera and it takes incredible images and it's very inspiring to me, but there's just some everyday life things about it that just frustrate me and would frustrate me in the long term. And look, if you've got the money, go for it. It is a fun camera, it's inspiring, I love the images it creates. God, it's too expensive. Like, I think you can pick them up for maybe like $2,500 now, secondhand. But I mean, save your money, buy something else and go on holidays and take photos with it, because that's a better investment to me than this camera. This is not a beginner camera, this is very much a wealthy camera. And it's a luxury. It's a luxury item, like a luxury car that you don't drive out all the time and you leave in the carriage and you take it out on special occasions and it takes beautiful images. Or you take it out on days like today. And it's lovely. But it has been a joy to use, and I say that not begrudgingly, but it has been lots of fun. It's a good camera. I'm not going to call it a bad camera. I just don't think it's worth the money and should be better. Well, as always, folks, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to go try find these deer and take some wildlife photography images. Maybe with this. I'll see what I can do. If I do take any, they'll be after this. Feel free to like, subscribe and share the channel. If you've got any thoughts on the Leica Q2 or my thoughts, let me know. And as always, have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next one.